What's up, Buck Dougladini in the garage in these trying and uncertain times. No, I'm just kidding. Let's not do that. Let's talk about some cars, right? And trucks and Jeeps. We did a video a week ago about zombie reboots. That's when a nameplate goes away and then is brought back by the manufacturer. The one that's on everyone's mind right now is the Bronco. That went away in 1995, comes back in 2021. Now, these happen all the time. Most of the time, it's just a marketing ploy. Very rarely do the enthusiasts get the car that they want, that they think they deserve. We talked about a bunch of them the other day, all the ones that had originally come to mind, and overwhelmingly in the comments of that video, which I will link up there, people were like, hey man, this one is, really great, or this one's really awful, I wish you talked about this. And we got enough comments on enough of them that we're going to do another video. So that's what this is. Today we're talking about some more zombie reboots, the #1 most requested one in the comments. And the reason we're making this video, so many people chimed in to say this one, the Chevy Nova. Chevy Nova, which I didn't even realize got rebooted. That's how forgettable it was. Spoiler alert, if you're wondering if it was a positive reboot, it was not. I swear, someday soon I'm going to make a video where I'm not throwing shade at Chevy. It's not intentional, it's the way the dice are rolling. So let's dig into the Chevy Nova. The original Chevy Nova exists from 1962 to 1979, 4 generations in there. Chevy Nova is interesting. It's kind of like the GTO, where it wasn't originally its own car or the car. It was a trim level of the Chevy 2. Chevy 2 is a very interesting vehicle. It is a hastily put together response to the Ford Falcon. Now, I don't mean hastily as in it was poor quality. I just mean they got it together remarkably fast. The Falcon comes out very successful. Chevy goes, whoops, we need to get a car in that segment. And within 18 months from conception to one rolling off the line, the Chevy 2 is there. Terrible name. They could have maybe taken another month to workshop a name, but the highest trim level of the Chevy 2 was the Nova. Now, the Chevy 2 was your everyman car. It was just, hey man, you need a car, here's a car. It wasn't meant to be an enthusiast car. It wasn't meant to be anything more than just a car. It's just a car. It works, it goes. It's like a Corolla today. It could come in a 2-door, it could come in a 4-door, it could come in a wagon, and any host of engine options. Now, where it gets interesting quickly, the Chevy 2 name goes away and it becomes the Chevy Nova. So we're just going to call it the Chevy Nova. But as most vehicles did in the 1960s, and as the 1960s progressed, and as the Pony Wars progressed, people started to say, hey, you got that thing with the little straight 6 in it. Would this 402 fit? Should we put a 402 in it? Maybe. And the Nova becomes a performance brand. Maybe not in the day, but when you think of a Chevy Nova today, you think of the Chevy Nova SS, right? You don't think of whatever, I don't honestly know what the lowest engine option was, but you don't think of like the economy family car wagon Nova. No, you think about the Chevy Nova SS from 1968. As well you should. It was an awesome car. That is the car's legacy. The Chevy Nova's legacy is as a performance brand. Now, they do away with it in 1979. That's no mystery there. Every time we talk about these history videos, and I'm talking about a car in the early 70s, you can pretty much bet it's about to be phased out because of the gas crisis, right? So, if you've got a performance brand that's known for cramming 402s under the hood, and then a gas crisis happens, it's probably not going to be around too long. The 4th generation was extremely watered down. I think the catchphrase for the 4th generation was, now it's beautiful, meaning they completely restyled it. They gave it those recessed headlights that the 2nd gen Camaro had, and they took away all the good engine options. I mean, the story is the same across every automaker for the 70s, whether we're talking about Chrysler, Ford, or Chevy. Hey, you had this really cool car in 1968, and by 1975, it's a total turd. It's not their fault, just product of the times. This is something that is Chevy's fault, though. In 1985, they bring the Nova back, but they take absolutely no care to preserve that performance legacy, to the point where they brought it back. If you might want to sit down, I know I almost fell when I read this. They brought it back as a rebadged Toyota. Have you ever seen that show Initial D? I never really got into anime, but a bunch of my friends got into it. that car, the AE86. It's basically a four-door version of that without all the fun of that car. Now, this isn't unique to Chevy. In the 80s, all of the big three were partnering with Japanese auto manufacturers to try to figure out a way to make the cars they were making. We talked about it last time. The second iteration of the, not second generation, the second iteration of the Dodge Charger was a Dodge Omni with a Mitsubishi engine. Ford had some Mazda stuff. The Love trucks that Chevy put out, I think those were Isuzu trucks rebadged. So this isn't uncommon. But what's egregious is calling it the Nova. Call it anything else. Call it whatever the heck else you want. Don't rebadge a Toyota and then give it a, I don't want to call the Nova a muscle car or a pony car, because it's, maybe it's a muscle car. Don't give it a muscle car name. That's egregious. Apparently it ticked off a lot of Chevy guys, and you guys spoke up in the comments last one. I got an overwhelming number of ones like, oh man, you missed the Nova, you're gonna wanna look into that. And I didn't even know it existed. Here's the worst part about this. The Toyota version sold better in the United States because they were less expensive. I don't understand. I don't understand how that happens, Chevy. Come on, man. You couldn't even find a way to make yours less expensive? It's not like they were a luxury version. Whatever, we're gonna move on. The Chevy Nova, that's egregious. I love the Chevy Nova. Such an iconic car. And the irony is that the criticism of the Chevy 2 when it first came out was that, wow, you just carbon copied the Falcon. And then today, the Chevy Nova is way more recognizable than a Falcon. Unless you are a very regular RCR viewer, you probably couldn't pick a Falcon out of a crowd, but you could probably pick a Nova out. Let's move on to a very similar car at its inception. The Dodge Dart from 1960 to 1976 was designed for the exact same purpose as the Chevy Nova. It's an everyman car. You need a car? Here's a car. Again, it's like your Civic today. It's just a car. It wasn't meant to be anything more than that. Again, you could have a two-door, you could have a four-door, you could have a wagon. The Dart, for context, was the smallest of Dodge's full-size sedans. So it's your family car, it's your commuter car. Now, just like the Nova, as the 60s progress, yeah, somebody was like, hey, we could fit a worked 360 under there, couldn't we? Here's the thing, and this is clearly a subjective take. In my opinion, when I think Dart, I think about the Dart wagon. I think about the four-door commuter Dart. I don't think of that as a performance brand. I could be way off base. But for that reason, I think that what Chrysler did when they brought the Dart back in 2013 made a bunch of sense. Now, this wasn't a rebranded Japanese car or anything. They made their own car. It was the Dodge Dart, and it was the Chrysler 200. Tiny little commuter car. Now, I had the opportunity to drive this car at one point. Now, had I not had that opportunity, I might have said that it was a crap car. In fact, when it came out, I remember thinking, ugh, what a bland car, you know? I had to take a business trip out to LA. If you ever have the opportunity to take a business trip out to LA, just quit your job, because it's not worth having to take a business trip out to LA. Now, I was staying in LA, but my business was actually in Glendora, so I was commuting for a few days from LA to Glendora. It's about a 40-minute drive, maybe an hour. I had rented a car, obviously, and I got a Dodge Dart. Now, at first, when they gave me a Dodge Dart, I was extremely disappointed. I was like, I gotta drive a Dodge Dart for a week? Anyway, long story short, too late, I know. It was a fine car. I didn't mind it at all as a car. It was quiet, it was comfortable, it had good amenities for this was in 2015, I think, so for a 2015 car. It was just a car that was fine. I remember thinking, you know, if I didn't love dailying my WJ, I could very easily see myself dailying one of these Dodge Darts. Not a car that I would aspire to, but it was just a car. Hey, you need a car? Here's a car. Fine, done. Not a performance car, not an enthusiast car, not a utilitarian car. And in my opinion, that is kind of the legacy of the Dart. Yes, there are plenty of Dodge Darts that got performance packages, but I don't feel like that's the legacy. Do you see what I'm saying? And to me, as an automotive enthusiast and as a self-proclaimed automotive historian, that's what matters in a reboot. Did you keep with the spirit of the original vehicle's legacy? I don't think they did that with the Nova. I don't think they did that with the Blazer. I don't think they did that with the Eclipse. We talked about that in the last one. I do think they did that with the Dart. I think it's a successful one. And in fact, I actually recorded this little rant about the Dart in the first video, and it ended up on the cutting room floor, but then a couple of you commented like, hey, you know what was a really good reboot? Specifically my good buddy Matt was like, hey man, you know what was a really good reboot? I had a Dart, and it was a fine car. It's just a car. Just here, you need a car? Here's a car. Drive a car. And that's the Dodge Dart. So moving on. Here's another one that I got a ton of comments on. I can't believe I didn't think of it for the first video, the Gladiator. The Gladiator that we now have that's based off the JLU Wrangler takes its name from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s Jeep trucks. Not 80s, actually. That's Jeep made the Gladiator J Series based off the full-size Wagoneer from 1960 to 1988. It dropped the Gladiator name in 1971, and then it was just the J Series trucks. For this video, we're just going to call them all the Gladiator. So these trucks were everything you'd think of as a 1960s, 70s, or 80s trucks. They were two-door. They were obviously full frame. That goes without saying. They were work trucks. I think the 60s and early 70s Gladiators are some of the best looking trucks of all time. Tied up there with the first gen Dodge and the are they 70s Fords with that weird, I think they call them notch hoods, maybe? I've heard Thunderhead and Junkyard Diggs talk about them. I think they call them the notch side Fords. I don't know, they're good looking. They're goofy at first and you stare at it for a while and you're like, wow, that's actually a gorgeous truck. I digress. These trucks were very iconic, very important to the Jeep brand when it was on Kaiser, AMC, and then Chrysler killed them off because they had their own trucks. Makes sense, no big deal. They take the name and they give it to the newest Jeep truck, the only Jeep truck we've had since the Comanche, and I have a hard time talking about that truck. Did you guys hear that Ford we just passed? I think this is the first one of these I'm ever recording on the highway. Because of pandemic, it makes more sense to take Route 80 to work now instead of the back roads, because there's no traffic, very little traffic, just really loud Fords. What was I saying? I have a hard time talking about the Gladiator because it's so polarizing among you folk. And it's not that I don't want to insult anybody, but I really can't nail down how I feel about it. I know that it would not be a truck for me, just because, well, first of all, I love WJs, I like SUVs. I'd rather have an SUV with a utility trailer than have a truck with a bed, because I feel like I'm dragging the bed around all the time when I don't need it. I can just go and get the utility trailer. I've got a video on that. Rant, if you want to hear that. Oh boy, what were we saying? I'm really losing it here. The Gladiator truck, I think they could have picked a better name. There are a ton of nameplates in Jeep's history. Personally, I think it should have been the JLU Scrambler. That's what I would have called it. If Jeep had bothered to ask, I would have called the new Gladiator, JT or JLT? I would have called it the JLU Scrambler, the Wrangler Scrambler, because I feel like that's more what it is than an actual truck. If you were to give me a two-door with a full-size bed, now I understand calling it a Gladiator. I don't think it's a bad representation of the Gladiator name. In fact, the Gladiator doesn't even have that great of a name. For every guy you find that loves it, there's another guy who thinks they were really bad trucks. I think they had some structural issues in the frame. Certainly the ones the military got as the why can't I remember what the designation for the military one was? Whatever, I'll put it somewhere when I find it later. There's some mixed reviews on them. They're gorgeous, and I would obviously love to own one. There's actually a total basket case one for sale in the next town over, and I drive by it every once in a while, and I ask the guy, how much is it? And he's like, $3,000, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, every body panel has a rust hole through it and some kind of dinger and dent. It doesn't even run right now. It's got 4 flats. The interior is completely destroyed. There are like raccoons living in there. But with a straight face, that guy tells me $3,000, so I'd love to buy it, but nope, sorry. Anyway, moving on. Here's another one that I actually recorded in the first video that ended up on the cutting room floor. The Ford Thunderbird that they brought back in 2002. This one's a difficult one. The Thunderbird is just an insanely iconic brand. It existed from 1955 to 1997, and during that time it was a 2-seater, it was a 4-seater, it was bigger, it was smaller. I mean, it really, I don't think people today remember or realize what a big deal the Thunderbird was. The Thunderbird almost killed the Corvette. When the Thunderbird came out, it immediately sold well. Immediately. That's not true of the C1. The C1 Corvette was actually very unpopular. There were quality issues, the engine was underpowered, and people opted for the larger sized Thunderbird. Chevy almost killed off the Corvette. They looked at it and they said, maybe we got the wrong idea with this thing. Thankfully they didn't, because obviously the Corvette is Corvette. The Corvette is the Corvette. That's all there is to it. It's amazing, and even the one today, abso-friggin-lutely amazing. But the Thunderbird, it always evolved. All right, whatever the consumer wanted, it evolved. Oh, 2 seats is not enough? Okay, we'll give you 4 seats. Oh, you don't like that there's 4 seats in it now? They actually made a cover for one of the generations so that you could cover up the back 2 seats and make it look like a 2-seater. It got turbos, it got superchargers, it ran in NASCAR. The Thunderbird's legacy is of a vehicle that can adapt to the times. That's what its legacy is. It did that very well for almost its whole existence. There was some stagnation in the 70s, but as we already covered, the 70s were an absolute shit show for all automakers, at least in the United States, because gas crisis. They kill it off in 1997, probably rightfully so. I feel like the late 90s, early 2000s weren't really the time for that type of vehicle. But then they bring it back in 2002. And they bring it back with that retro restyling that is the hallmark of the early to mid 2000s. Like the PT Loser and the HHR, and those are the 2 examples of how it could go wrong. And then obviously the examples of how it could go right are like the Mustang from I think 2005, and obviously the Charger and Challenger, which we're going to talk. We talked about the Charger a little bit last time. We may mention the Challenger in a minute, but they went full on retro, full on nostalgia. It's got the porthole window, very sleek, 60s stylings, round headlights, long hood. It did get a V8. I got to mention that. That's one thing that I think is a positive. I was actually surprised when I was researching, and I was like, let me see what crappy Vulcan V6 they gave this thing. Nope, it did get the V8. It was a Jaguar V8, I guess. Why not? Here's the problem. It was a retro reboot that nobody asked for. Even though it got the V8, it wasn't a performance car. So they were really just hoping to capitalize on boomer nostalgia. And that wasn't really the right time for that yet. 2002, I mean, some very serious world events had just happened, and it just wasn't. I remember when it came out as a kid. I've been an auto enthusiast my whole life. I was originally a Mopar guy, but obviously the Thunderbird, I always liked classic American cars. 50s, 60s, 70s were really my niche. So I remember when it came out being like, that's weird. I get what they did, but that's just weird. And that's how everybody else felt about it. And it didn't sell well, and it kind of tarnished. It's kind of like a joke. It's the butt of a joke now. And it tarnishes that legacy. The legacy of the Thunderbird was of, well, first of all, the Thunderbird defined the personal luxury car genre. That didn't exist before the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird created it, which is cool. But the legacy of the Thunderbird is as a car that can adapt. You got the Turbo Birds and the supercharged ones from the 80s and 90s, which literally won Best Car of the Year, which are so completely different from the big, boaty luxury cars of the 50s and 60s. It just adapted with the times very well, and sort of discreetly as well. It was kind of behind the scenes. It survived the muscle car craze without being a muscle car. It survived the gas crisis. And then Ford kind of phones it in. I don't know if the 2002 reboot is the product of a lack of effort. It seems like that. It seems they just phoned it in and said, just turn the nostalgia dial to 11 and be done with it. But it might have just been a tone-deaf response. They might have put a ton of time and energy into it, and it just didn't. They just They just missed the mark. Whatever it is, they definitely did miss the mark. Let's talk about a vehicle that did not miss the mark. This is hands down the best reboot, I'm gonna say ever, certainly that I can think of. And you're gonna think I'm just fanboying out, but bear with me. I'll make my case, I'll make it quick, and we'll move on to the worst reboot ever, the most egregious, the Dodge Challenger. The Dodge Challenger is the best reboot ever, period. Here's why. The original Dodge Challenger exists from 1970 to 1983. It came to the party to do one thing, and one thing only. It came to be a large, overpowered, large displacement, unnecessarily American pony car. It came to compete directly with the Pontiac Firebird and the Mercury Cougar, which were the upscale versions of the Camaro and Ford. They were the fancier luxury options. That's what the Challenger was. It said, hey, Charger, you got the Mustang and the Camaro? Cool. I'm going to take care of the Cougar and the Firebird. Done and done. It came to be loud. It came to be fast. It came to melt rubber and burn liquid dinosaurs. They killed it off in 1983. That is a no-brainer from everything we've already talked about. They bring it back in 2008 to do what? To be loud, to burn rubber, to burn liquid dinosaurs, to be unnecessarily American, to be a large, boaty, gaudy, overly American pony car. They brought it back exactly how it was in the context of modern car culture. Boom, nailed it, done and done. No more conversation. That's what a reboot should be. Whether it was a passenger car, a truck, a van, a pony car, bring it back in the same spirit of what it was. And Dodge did that exactly. Let's move on to the most egregious, mind-boggling reboot, and it's not even a reboot. I didn't include it in the first one because it's not a reboot, but you all mentioned it so many times in the comment, we're going to talk about it. It's not a reboot, it's like a side quest. It's just mind-boggling. It's the worst example of whoring out a storied nameplate as a marketing scheme. Of course, we're talking about the Ford Mustang Machi. For those of you who are lucky enough to not have heard about this yet, Ford in 2021 is releasing a four-door crossover fully electric vehicle. And for some godforsaken, mind-melting reason, they're calling it the Mustang. The Mustang Machi. It has mild Mustang styling, and I guess the idea is it's like a performance electric vehicle to separate it closer to Tesla than like a Prius. Here's the problem with that. Now, obviously, this is probably a marketing success because while I hope for your sake you haven't heard about this, you have. If you're even remotely into car culture, you have. When it first came out, everybody was talking about it. Everybody's in an uproar. I mean, it was probably a masterclass in marketing, but it was an absolute fail as far as, you know, doing justice to your most important nameplates. Everybody's talking about it. I would not have heard about this, and if I had, I would not have, absolutely not have given it the time of day. And this is, I think, the third video I'm mentioning it in. The nameplate Mustang is one of the most important in all automotive history, period. It wasn't the first muscle car. Probably wasn't even the most popular, but it is the muscle car that started the muscle car craze, the pony car craze. Its legacy is built on burning liquid dinosaurs. And you're just, and it's not even like the other Mustang is gone, so like this exists at the same time as the other Mustang. Come on, Ford. And here's this whole thing. Obviously, car brands are going to do whatever they have to do to sell more cars. If whoring out a storied nameplate sells a few more units, obviously that's what's going to get done. I'm not faulting them there necessarily, but I don't have to like it either. As, again, automotive enthusiast, self-proclaimed automotive historian, this kind of thing is egregious. It screws up the timeline, and it really offends when you hear Mustang, you have a very specific thing you're expecting to see. It doesn't have 4 doors, and it certainly has an internal combustion engine in it. You know, when you hear Chevy Nova, you're not picturing a friggin' Toyota. When you hear Mitsubishi Eclipse, you're not picturing a crossover SUV. That's just how it goes. So as car guys, this kind of thing, these zombie reboots, they can be really awesome in the case of the Challenger and even the Gladiator, because I know a lot of people really like the Gladiator, and I'm fine with that. And it can be really bad, like when Ford, whatever. I'm done being angry about this. It's egregious. It'll probably sell really well. They actually just put one out that had like 1,400 horsepower. It's not a production model. It's some kind of marketing thing. I don't know. I guess it was like an 8-motor electric Machi. They did some marketing stunt with it. They'll probably give it to Ken Block. They had a video with Ken Block when it first came out. It was super cringy. It was 14 minutes long. They wouldn't let him drive it. It was just him making jokes about the frunk the whole time. I like Ken Block, which is why I watched all 14 minutes, even though it was immediately obvious it was going to be absolute torture. Anyway, let me know what you think. Leave me your comments down there in the squawk boxes. Let me know what your favorite zombie reboot is. Let me know what your least favorite zombie reboot is. And you can let me know if I maybe missed any more. I'm not probably going to make a third one out of this because Mark would only bear so much of me ranting about cars. Or maybe not. I don't know. Doesn't matter. If you like the video, that's common sense. Consider subscribing to the channel. Maybe even check us out on Etsy. Eric and I are doing big things over there. I can't tell you how well these shirts have sold. I appreciate everybody who's bought one of our Jeep American flag shirts. I will take this opportunity to pop in a little teaser. We're working on more American flags for those of you who happen to be enthusiasts of something other than Jeep. Those will be live soon. Check them out on the Etsy store. Very much appreciate all your support. I'll cut it here as always. Thanks for watching. See you next time.